Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Nanny News. It's your host, Ashley, aka Nanny Announcements. And on this episode, we are going to be talking about the history of being a nanny. Sit back, relax, and get ready for some juicy facts about the history of nannies. Alright guys, so I wanted to say a quick announcement before we get started with our history for the week. But I wanted to basically announce that I don't know if a lot of you may know that I am part of the Nannypreneur team. Nannypreneur magazine is a company where we basically bring nanny lifestyle to entrepreneurship. It's going to be like the yellow page for the nanny industry, where you can go to this magazine and find all things related to the childcare, from agencies to childcare businesses to to anything. Like it's to marketing. We also help businesses with their marketing by providing like ads, promotions, things like that. So if you have a small business and you're wanting to get more information about Nannypreneur magazine, then please head over to our Instagram. I'm gonna put the name right here at Nannypreneur Mag, and there you'll be able to find out all about Nannypreneur magazine, who's on our team, the editor-in-chief, which is Kimberly Brown, which she's also known as Nanny Kim on the Go. I'm just part of the marketing team, where you will see myself on the page a lot with the reels and just helping promote all the things that we have coming up. But with that being said, I am actually going to be attending my first Nanny Palooza conference. Actually, this is my first conference period in person, besides being online, as being a nanny. I've never attended Nanny Palooza, NIA, US Nanny Association conference. I did that one online one year, but I never has done any of these conferences in person. And I'm so excited for next weekend because I am going to be at Nanny Palooza with Nannypreneur Mag. I'm going to be at their table. We have a full-on table set up for you guys. And it's not just no regular vending table, y'all. This is going to be a table where you can come and sit and chat with us. I'm going to be going live at almost constantly interviewing you guys. Basically, why are you a nanny? Why you love being a nanny? Is this your first Nanny Palooza conference? We're going to be having games at our table. Who can change the diaper the fastest? Who can make a bottle the fastest? We're going to also be giving away giveaways. We have about 4 or 5 major giveaways that we're going to be giving away. Also, we have 50 bags that we're going to be giving away to 50 special nannies. So, you guys, come over to Nannypreneur Magazine's table. I will get to be able to meet you. We can meet person to person. And I'm just so excited for it. And I just can't wait. I know that a lot of people are like, it's just Nanny Palooza, because a lot of people have been to Nanny Palooza before. But for me, now this ain't just no regular Nanny Palooza for me. This is like my first Nanny Palooza, my first time being a vendor. Like, I'm just beyond excited. And I hope that I can see a lot of you guys there, meet a lot of my nanny friends that I've been talking to for over 5 years online. I just never met them. I haven't even met my business partner, you guys, Kimberly Brown. I haven't even met her in person. So this week until next weekend is going to be a very, very big weekend for me. So I'm very excited for it. I hope to see you guys all there. If you are attending, please stop by Nannypreneur Magazine table. Okay, guys? All right, so let's jump to our history about being a nanny. All right, guys, so we are going to be talking about the history of a nanny. So before I get started, I have to shout out my girls at my girls for this. So I was on Clubhouse. If you guys know that Crystal Gale, she is the founder of the Clubhouse Room that has over like 200 some members. I think it's almost like 300 to 400. I don't even know yet. Don't even know the exact number. But in that room, it's basically we go in Clubhouse every morning, and Crystal is the moderator, or she has a team of moderators as well. And basically, you go in the room and you share your wins for the week. You share how you're doing. Say you're struggling and you need some advice, or say you just need to vent. say you have a huge, big event coming up and you want to get it out to the nannies, that room is one of the best rooms you can go to. It's the best way you can start your day. It happens at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time and 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. She has 2 different times to help for both coasts basically. So I go on there every day at the 10:30 time because that's 7:30 my time over here. And I was on there last week, and we were last week, as we all know, was Nanny Recognition Week. And we were, Mitch's was on there. She was on the stage and she gave away a giveaway. And in the giveaway, she was, her question was, when was Nanny Recognition Week founded? And we got on the discussion about that. And these Crystal and Sherry, from the owner from the Nanny Cars, went on and shared an article about Nanny Recognition and just some history about Nanny Recognition Week. And then it got the room going about how we need more information about history of being a nanny. So, you know me as the announcement girl and your nanny news girl, I was like, I'm about to do this. I'm about to make this into an episode. So I'm shouting out the Clubhouse Wake Up and Become Wow. I'm shouting out Crystal, I'm shouting out Sherry, and I'm shouting out Meeches, because if it wasn't for y'all, this episode would not be here for today. So thank you so much for this idea. Thank you so much for allowing me to be the person to share some history about the nannies. I know that you guys will do your own, share some things as well, but I'm honored to be able to share a lot of history to you guys. I'm probably going to make this episode into a series episode because there's a lot of information about nannies, and we can go all the way back to the 1300s, if not even before, and we can come all the way to here to 2022. And there's so much has happened in between our industry from that era to this era. So I'm gonna kind of go off of some major eras, and then we're gonna end it with our era. So this episode, we're going to talk a lot about the Victorian era, which is about the 18th to 19th century, from about 1800s to about 1900s. That's the era we're going to talk about today. Our next episode, we're probably going to talk about our era, the 21st century era, and how us nannies got to where we are now. And then I'm probably going to end the series with how children were raised. When I was doing a lot of this information, you guys, and digging a lot about it, it just was so interesting to hear about how some of these children were raised just based off of the era that you grew up in. And it's juicy, and I got a lot of juicy information for you guys today. So we're going to start with the basics of where the word nanny came from. How did we get this word nanny? Because there was somebody that invented it. There was something that happened with it. It wasn't just, falling down on us. So we're going to start with that. We're going to start with how the word nanny came. So the word nanny comes from all over. If you research where nanny came from, the research is everywhere. There's not just really, and there's one thing that sticks out the most out of everybody's research. There's two things that stood out to me the most when I was researching where the word nanny came from, and these 2 facts were the two main facts that kept coming up after over and over and over. So I'm assuming these are the 2 most consistent research facts that we have. So where the word the nanny came from, so it says that the word comes from as early as the 1600s. The nanny comes from the name Anne. And it's the reason why they say that is because back in the 1600s, women that were nannies had the name Anne, and they would go by Nan. And so then eventually the word nanny became attached to that. So it says, so that's where one of the facts that came from. But it officially hit the dictionary in 1785. And the meaning behind it in the Webster Dictionary, it says that it came into the Webster Dictionary in 1785 with the meaning that a person providing childcare. That's it. A person providing childcare. That is the definition of a nanny. It was brought in the dictionary in 1785. They say that the word comes from the name Anne, And they say that because back in the 1600s, a lot of the women that were nannies had the name Anne. So they would be called Nan, Anne, Nanny, and then eventually Nanny came about. So I thought that was really cool. So basically the word nanny was part of the dictionary, was part of everybody's vocabulary starting in 1785. Now, where does that take us? Well, basically, nannying is so different than it is today. We're going to talk about the Victorian area, and you guys are going to see me looking down a lot because there's a lot of information. I'm going to put some facts up on the screen as well so you can see and read as well. But we're going to talk about the Victorian era, and if you guys know about the Victorian era, that area was rough growing up. If you've done any research on your own, that era was the majority, that's kind of the set tone of being a nanny. And that if you research a lot about the history of nanny, this era is where it kind of majorly started. And this is where we're going to get into a lot of the different names of being a nanny. There's more than just being a nanny. They were called a lot of different things back in the day. So we're going to jump into it. So like I said, the Victorian era, which is the 18th century to the 19th century. Basically, this era was really rough for kids growing up. And they say that that in 1851, there were over 25,000 women that were providing some sort of childcare for money. So that's kind of why this area is really big for our industry and kind of the jump start of it, because over 25,000 women came in and started providing some type of childcare for some form of money. And a lot of this happened because there was a market, an economy issue going on in the the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century. And so it required a lot of people, a lot of women, which was not common because a lot of the men were the ones that would go and make the labor. But women had to start coming into play and start making money on their own because they had no choice because of the economy that they were living in. And as we all know, you cannot live without making some type of money. So these women, starting in 1851, that's when it started booming around. So most of these, when we talk about these nannies, we're going to talk about, think about this, that most of these nannies live-in nannies. I mean, majority, if not 90% of them lived in their house that they did their work in 24/7. So live-out nannies was not common. It was not common for people to come to work and to leave work. It was just that you living with this family, you have a room and a board, and you would have a small salary to be on top of the room and the board. In some cases, you didn't have room and board on top of it. You would have to pay for the room and board plus the small salary that you receive. Obviously, it depends on your race. It depends on what you're providing. It depends on the family. It depends on the family situations. It just depends on a lot of things. But just keep in mind, this is not every nanny did this, but a majority of the nannies were live-in nannies at that time. So during this time, nannies were called nursemaids, wet nurses, and governess. So what is a nursemaid? A nursemaid would be found in the wealthy houses. A lot of the what the wealthy houses. Honestly, a lot of the help that you see, these are all people that were in the upperclassmen. The middle class would slowly start getting here towards the end of the era, but most of the time we're working with the upper class in this time, and we're talking upper class. So these women, nursemaids, were found in the wealthy houses, and these women were basically with multiple kids. They would usually be the ones that would report to the older servant or the older nanny. So these were just basically the ones that didn't have all the experience or education that the older nanny had. But there were so many kids in the house that the family needed more. They know that they needed more help. So they would hire these nursemaids that would come in and help basically the nanny. We're going to get a little bit more detailed into what the nursemaids maids did here in a second, but I just wanted to talk about what each of their job titles are. So the nursemaid is the one that reports to the older nanny. Wet nurses are the ones that would be solely come in, guys, just for breastfeeding. So these women would just have their own baby and producing milk. So these families would hire these nurses to come in and strictly feed the babies. So back in this time, guys, in the 1800s, the 1900s, formula was not invented. Formula was not here. Obviously, there's some forms that families would probably they would put flour mixed with water and certain things to make it eventually. But during this time, there was the death rate for infants, fertility was so high, and a lot of it was from starvation, malnutrition, and diarrheas, just because they didn't get fed. Because these women, if you all know that not every woman makes milk after they have a baby, or enough milk to provide for their baby. And being that there was not a lot of research or education about formulas and baby development, that they didn't have no choice but to hire these nannies to come in. So what these nannies would do, they would literally leave, and these nannies were not allowed to bring their own nanny. A lot of families did not want you to bring your own kids. So these women that just had their own babies had to give up their baby to another person to provide food and care for them, while they go provide food for this family. And there was a lot of stories in here that were so sad that would say that these wet nurses would come in, feed these babies, and then eventually they would get phone calls throughout the day saying that their own baby is struggling, or their own baby had died because of the lack of malnutrition and food supply that they had because their mom was focusing on providing money and having to feed these kids over here. So wet nurses was that one was. It was hard for me to read. They're solely there to provide food for the kids. That's it. They're not really there to provide childcare. They're not really there to provide anything else but provide breast milk to these kids. A lot of these women would have to eat certain things for the kids. They would have to follow certain rules. And some did, some didn't. As you all know, that a lot of these women they're coming from poor and don't have any money and looking for money and wealth. So some of them just came in and did what they needed to do and leave, and did not give a crap about the baby or the family or what they're feeding the baby or what's what's in their system. So, it was a lot. That brings up a lot of, issues back in the day. But wet nurses is very common back then, where they would hire people to come in just to solely feed their kids. And those nannies had to give up their own kid to do that. Crazy to me. I couldn't even understand it. But now let's go to what a governess is. So a governess would be a woman that families hired that would come into the house and help the children with the education, including language development. So they would teach them French, Spanish, anything. So these women would have to know all the stuff. They would have to know all the things about writing, math, science, social studies, English. They would also be there to solely help with teach them about fine arts. So that sometimes they would need to learn how to be a dancer, or learn how to play the piano or draw or the violin. These women would come in and basically help with the education part. Now, don't get me wrong, some families would just have a governess, so their job duty would be the education part plus the childcare duty as well. So they would be a governess / nanny. And some families would have all three of these people, all four of these people, a governess, a wet nurse, a nursemaid, and a nanny for their team, plus servants, plus people out there. They would have a full-on team. So those are the three main things what nannies were called. And also nannies were just called nannies as well. And we all know what a nanny does. We provide childcare. And now let's go back to the older nannies. I'm sorry, let's go back to nursemaids and older nannies. So there were situations where there was an older nanny in the household, and these nannies would be the one that would be the direct, that the sole contact to the parents. The parents would tell them when they have an issue. They would tell them when they have an issue, when they need to communicate. That would be the nanny that do that. The nursemaid is the one that's below that one and is reporting to the older nanny. You would see this happen a lot in houses that had multiple kids, because as we all know, childbirthing was very popular back in the day. Families would have multiple kids, not just one or two. They would have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It just depends, like, on the family and what the family wanted to provide. So they would have to have a nursemaid and an older nurse. I thought that was really cool or interesting to read about, because we never heard of you don't hear a lot about nursemaids anymore, but I'm sure there are situations that are out there like that, where there are some nannies that there's 2 nannies in the household. We call them rotational nannies. That's where we're getting into the rotational part. That's where we're going to talk about next episode, where we take nurse nannies and turn it into rotational. We take this and turn it into agencies. We take this and turn it into that. That's where we're going to talk about next episode. But that's kind of what a nursemaid and nurse nanny in our area would be like. Would be basically kind of like a rotational nanny. And you kind of have one that's the one that's solely the main one, that's the communication to the parents. Let's see what we can else talk about. Let's see what else of facts we got. Y'all, I got a whole list of facts over here that I'm just like flying. Like my mouth, I feel like I'm I don't even, what's that? A vomit. I feel like I'm just like vomiting out everything right now and just like throwing it at you. But nannies during this time or parents. Okay, so during this time, nannies were basically solely the provider for the children. The children would not see their parents that much. Basically, some parents weren't even involved in their kid's life. That the nanny was basically the surrogate mother, if you want to call that, the mother that comes in and just takes over. So a lot of these nannies at this time were older nannies, older women. They seemed to have a little bit more strict rules, just a lot more mean. You would see a lot more strictness than you see loveness in the house, which was kind of rough for the kids. Like you said, they didn't get to see their parents that much, so they're solely looking at the nanny to provide that love, the attachment, that affectionate that kids need every day. And some families didn't, and some nannies didn't get that out, because that's just part of the era that they lived in. It was hard, and so these nannies had to be hard on these kids. So you could see that the relationship to the nanny kid and the nanny was very, very, very strong, sometimes stronger than the parents, if not all the time stronger than the parents, because like we said, the parents were not involved in the kid's life. The parents at this time were worried about, making the money, making ends meet. So they solely they hired you if you were hired in as a nanny back in this time, you know that you're giving up your entire life. And I mean entire life, including your children, to become this sole provider to this family. So I'm sure those nannies struggled a lot during this time. Nannies during this time were older, often didn't have their own children. So they also say, they need to, excuse me, I'm just reading my facts over here, guys. Families that have Okay, so we're going to talk about the duties of what I'm sorry. All right, let's talk about the duties that the nannies did during this time. So for the nannies that would have the nursemaid and a nanny, the nanny would basically be the person that would provide get them dressed, provide activities for them or take them to an activity, make sure they are fed. Doesn't mean that they did the cooking, but make sure they eat their food. And then they just, they just do the easy work, I guess you could say. But if there was a nursemaid in the rotation, in the mix of that family, the nursemaid would be the one that would be considered doing the cleaning, the scrubbing of the floors of the nursery, the cooking, the bed making, all the messy or the worst stuff about being a nanny, or the cons about being a nanny. That's what the nursemaid would do, in addition to helping the nanny. So the nanny was main provider of the childcare, and the nursemaid would be her second hand. Like I said, it was just so different. Reading a lot about this history, you guys, it was just yes, they did a lot of things like we still do as nannies to this day, but the way that these nannies had to give up their life and give up their children and give up their families just to provide for these families. And I get it, us nannies, we do that a lot still to this day. We do put our families first in a lot of our incidents, but it just kills me to hear some of these stories about these nannies. Especially the wet nurse stories, guys. Those wet nurse stories were harsh. Like, one mother said that she went home, she would go over to the house every day, feed the kid, and there was one day that she got a phone call and her son had died. That was only a few weeks old because he didn't have food. The person that was watching him couldn't provide food, didn't make food, and she couldn't hire a wet nurse herself. So it's just crazy. Back in the day was real rough as a nanny, rough as a kid, rough for everyone. Like, it was rough compared to what we have now, and everything that has changed from now. So I'm thankful for these nannies. I mean, it definitely has shaped us for our industry, for who we are today. If these nannies didn't go through or share their stories, then we wouldn't be able to change a lot of the things that we have changed so far in our industry. But I think it's very important to know a little bit of back history of what it was like back in the day for nannies, or what it was like for children back in the day, because that's our our goal and our job is to take care of children. So knowing the history behind it just makes you even more better as a nurse. So I'm honored to be able to share some of this history for you. You guys, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 different links that I'm going to drop in the description box below. Please check these links out. There are 9 different articles that you can read that will give you so much information about being a nanny and what it was like in the 1800s in the 1900s. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, gave you a little clarity of where the word nanny came from, and what it was like for nursemaids, wet nurses, governess, nannies in general back in the day. So I hope you kind of learned a little something. And like I said, if you would like to know more information, or like to know just more about being what it was like to be a nanny back in then, please hit the description box below. There are 9 different links, so you can check those out. Like we said, we're going to hit back next. Actually, we will not be having an episode next week because we will be in North Carolina for Nanny Palooza. So expect an episode to come out the following week with part 2 of this series, where we're going to talk about what changed from here to now, and what would be considered this to this. Like the nursemaid and the nanny would be considered a rotational nanny now back in our days. So we're going to kind of compare some things about what we do now and what they don't do, what they didn't do back in the day. And talk about us nannies in the 21st century and what we're doing and how we can change and how we're making noise and how we've changed the industry so much. And honestly, we're going to talk about how our industry has changed in the past just the 3 years since COVID has hit us. And since COVID, I feel like our industry has boomed. And I can't wait to share some stories and some facts about that with you guys in the next couple weeks. Like we said, if you're going to Nanny Palooza, please stop by our table at Nannypreneur Magazine. And I hope to meet as many nannies as I can at the next weekend. I hope to see you guys there. If not, stay tuned for part 2 of our history lesson of being a nanny. Thanks, guys. See you guys soon. Love you all. Have a great weekend. Bye.